Hello students, I'm Himani Sharma, your UGC NET educator. In this new video, we are going to start with the part 2 that we were supposed to do for what? For English literature shift 2. Yes, we have done the part 1 of the same paper 2 of English literature, where we tried to analyze the cycle of December 2022, the questions which were asked in the UGC NET 2023 examination. So we have done in part 1, we have covered majority of questions which were related to English literature, and in this video only we are going to move forward with the rest of the questions which were left. So that is why this video was segregated into 2 parts, because we cannot provide the entire questions in one go as well, because it will be too exhaustive for the students like you as well to watch. So without wasting any further time, as I told you that I will be analyzing shift 2 of paper 2 of English literature. The first question that I have here is right now appearing on your screens, and I would like you all to try to answer these questions as well, so that you know that where you are lacking, or are you able to answer these questions frequently, correct? So the first question that I have here is, which among the following are true in the context of 𝐶 achievement? So you can, pause your screens, try to answer these questions from these very options, and then move forward by, playing the video again. The answer to this very question is option C. That is option A, B and C are the ones which are correct when we talk about it. These 3 terms, these 3 statements in the context of a writer named 𝐶 𝐏𝐫𝐤. First is that he wrote Arrow of God and Things Fall Apart. We know that there was a trilogy which was there for the English literature in, with regards to 𝐶 𝐏𝐫𝐤. There were 3 books which were there, which were written and which were inspired by the, lines of certain poems, right? Second point is his Novelist as a Teacher or Novelist as Teacher is a seminal essay in the context of African literature. Yes, that's true as well, because he was not the one who was just writing novels etc., but he wrote certain critical essays as well. Correct? So yes, of course, even if we are covering a writer from the perspective or the point of view of novels, we should also be considering his or her critical works as well. Same is the case with 𝐶 𝐏𝐫𝐤. Next is the name of the tribe he depicted in Things Fall Apart is Igbo, a very, very important thing. There were 2 novels with the same tribe, right? So of course Things Fall Apart has the same tribe as its representative which we have there in, right? The D and E, why are they wrong? First of all, he is a Kenyan born American literature. No, that's wrong, because of the fact that he was born in Ogidi, that is Eastern Nigeria, not Kenya. Even though they are part of Africa as a whole, but of course these are 2 different segments, right? The 2 different parts of Africa. Then we have, he wrote the essay An Abolition of English Department. This essay, of course, was written by someone who was 𝐏𝐫𝐤 𝐏𝐿𝐻. First of all, she was also the one who talked about the English and the native language, the differentiation between the 2. And of course, on the abolition of English department, because she wanted to tell about that, yes, English is the one which is as a language also trying to colonize us. Correct? So 𝐏𝐫𝐤 𝐏𝐿𝐻's On the Abolition of English Department is written by 𝐏𝐫𝐤 𝐏𝐿𝐻 and not 𝐶 𝐏𝐫𝐤. Correct? So we have these 2 options as incorrect. The D and E are incorrect, but the other 3 A, B, C, these are true in the context of 𝐶 𝐏𝐫𝐤, the writer. The next question is, identify the correct ones. Reading the questions carefully, you need to know that yes, where they have asked for the not things, where they have asked for the correct and other things as well. So the correct ones among the following. The Apology for Poetry was written by Sir Philip Sidney, etc. So read these statements and then we'll try to explain these things in a better way as well. The answer to this question is option A. That is A, B and C, these 3 options are correct. Now first of all, the Apology of Poetry was written by Sir Philip Sidney. Yes, of course, we know this very thing as well. Sir Philip Sidney wrote this very work, that is the Apology of Poetry, as a counterblast to Stephen Gossen's The School of Abuse. So first of all, it was Stephen Gossen who wrote The School of Abuse, to which Sidney later on gave a reply in his Apology for Poetry. Correct. So this statement is also true. Third is Stephen Gosson wrote The School of Abuse in a euphuistic style. Now what is a euphuistic style? Euphuistic style is something which talks about a lot of similes, the usage of similes, alliteration and antithesis. So basically, and of course, euphuistic style is also characterized by the usage of extensive, elaborate language. So Gosson's School of Abuse is in an elaborative, written in an elaborative language. So you see how these very terms as such also play an important role, that when you are preparing for such a question, you should know that what kind of style that particular question has. Next is, Sidney's style was characterized by the neoclassical strain. No, restraint, because he never wrote in a neoclassical manner, and of course neoclassicism was something which came after Sidney, correct? Sidney and Gosson wrote their critical treatise in the 18th century. How could that be possible? So this statement is also wrong because of the fact that these people wrote in the 16th century. Sidney was someone who was belonging somewhere or the other to the Elizabethan era, correct? So hence 16th century. And all the more Sidney's style. How was Sidney's style? If not the neoclassicism wala, then how was Sidney's style, what was Sidney's style characterized by? He was known as, his style was personal, deeply personal, passionate and intricate, and he was known as a Renaissance man. A very important fact that can be asked in the UGC NET examination, that what was Sidney known as at that point of time? He was also known as a Renaissance man, correct? Then we have, of which of the following works have not been written by Thomas Carlyle? First of all, we will not be discussing, we'll just be discussing the answer to this very question because of the fact that the options here were provided wrong in the question paper, correct? So what is that we are supposed to write and we are talk about here? Let's just see the options and their correct answers, that who wrote which work, correct? Hudibras, first of all, was written by Samuel Butler. Satirical poem, written in a mock heroic style, right? So mocking is also there. The heroic grand style of writing poetry is also characterized here in Samuel Butler's Hudibras, correct? Second is on heroes, hero worship and the heroic in history and the French Revolution are the books written by Thomas Carlyle. These were the two books which were written by Thomas Carlyle. Third is The Hour and the Man, and this was the official answer key in which they dropped the question. Correct? The Hour and the Man is not any poem, not any play, but it is an 1841 work by Harriet Martineau. Correct? And the work's genre is a novel. Correct? Next is Of Human Bondage, written by William Somerset Maugham, and it is a semi-autobiographical coming-of-age novel. That means it is a Bildungsroman. This is Bildungsroman. This is a genre which deals with the characters coming of age, and it is semi-autobiographical, which means that it has some of the elements, some of the events which were related to Maugham's own life as well, and some are fictional, some are created. Correct? Next question, which one of the followings have not been authored by J.S. Mill or John Stuart Mill? Now, you have to answer this very question. This has been related to what? The literary theory. And of course, the previous questions which we did, of course, as a tip which I give you all is, you can paste your sticky notes wherever you have made your own notes and add these pointers down there. Correct? So, answer to this question would be what? The answer to this question is option C. That is, C and D only are the ones which are not written by whom? J.S. Mill. Other books, Subjection of Women, Thoughts on a Parliamentary Reform and On Liberty, these three are written by J.S. Mill. Correct? So, Thoughts on the Parliamentary Reform, of course, is a political science essay written by J.S. Mill. Subjection of Women, of course, again written by J.S. Mill. Favor of legal and social equality between men and women. That is why the subjection of women here, the main theme which talks about, which deals is that how women should also be given the legal rights, right? The legal and social equality should pertain when it comes to women and men as well. Then On Liberty, published in 1859, which of course if it talks about the concept of liberty on its own, correct? So try to note down the publication date wherever possible. Next question. Which among the following statements are true in the context of a literary research? In the previous video as well, we talked about somewhere or the other the literary research. What is the literary research? So here, if we are talking about the English literature, of course, they are going to ask us the questions on the research methodology from the literary research as well. So we should be knowing that what statements are true in the context of literary research. The answer to this very question is option C. That is A, B and D only. These are true in the context of that literary research is devoted to the enlightenment of criticism, because of course through research we criticize certain works. We do the criticism, the critical analysis, the application of a particular theory, correct? It seeks to eliminate the work of art as it really is, to show a particular genre, to show a particular writer in a particular light, right? As it really is. It tries to see the writer as he or she really was, which I already talked about in the previous pointer only, that to illuminate the work of art as it really is, and of course show the writer in the same light, that if a writer was an African American or maybe just a slave narrative is being written, then he or she was a slave, and that is what led them to write what they wrote. So there were certain things which led to the, amalgamation of various pointers which made that writer to become who he or she was. Third point, why is it not there? Because it says that literary research has no connection with the proffered information. Why do we say, what is proffered? Proffered here is the one which is offered, right? The offered information in the context of the literary research. Why do we say that there is no connection? Of course, the information which is provided to us, it has some kind or the other kind of connection with each other. So that is why this option is wrong. Next is false in the context of autobiographical research amongst the following statements which are there. The answer to this very question is option B, that is B, C and D. These three are false. Only the autobiographical research, of course, what is first of all autobiographical research? Empirical resources are counted as something which are there for the autobiographical research. What is empirical? What are the empirical sources? Empirical sources are the sources from whom which you acquire through your observation or your experience. Empiricism in itself is a very, big branch of philosophy which also deals with how through experience we gain knowledge. Very important and prominent empiricist, Dr. John Locke also, he talked about, John Locke, a philosopher, he also talked about that how our mind is something which looks like a blank slate, and through the usage of particular experiences, we write on that very blank slate, we write on that very blank paper, correct? So, autobiographical, of course, through our observation, it can be done, correct? And it also has the sources which are based from our own experience. That is also what is empirical in nature. Life narratives, how, for example, if I am a Hindu, how have I been treated as a Hindu? How have a person who is a slave, how has he or she been treated throughout? So his or her life narrative. Oral stories, anything which he or she also tells through certain anecdotes, certain oral, stories, that is also something which is autobiographical, even though that is not written. Documents which are both official and personal, that is official documents of that very person could be used as an autobiographical research part, or personal, that is his or her personal diaries, memorials, right, epistles, videos, photos, and different kinds of techniques to gather the data which is autobiographical in nature. Hence the other three statements are incorrect, but yes, because of the fact that these very things are the first hand resources of a person to acquire right? This can be accepted on face value, that it is really important. It can be accepted as it really is. If I, as a person, I'm reading a slave narrative, I'm seeing the atrocities that a person has gone through, I will of course accept it as it really was. Let's just imagine the example of India only during the colonial period, that how the Britishers used to treat us Indians. They used to call us barbaric, uncivilized. There are multiple oral anecdotes as well which have, you know, been transferred from one person to the other through the oral tradition. Now, because of the fact that these were autobiographical as well, these can be accepted on the face value. Hence, we talk about this very option which is correct. Next is key attributes and skills required in the context of tools and techniques for literary research. The answer to this very question, these are the options. You can look, pause, look, and then answer. The answer to this question is option C. That is A, C and D are the ones, A, C and D are the ones which are the key attributes required to conduct what kind of research? For the tools and techniques which are used for literary research. Having an overview of the main online and printed sources, of course these are the tools from where we are going to gather the data for our literary research. There are certain books which are available on internet, so how are we going to gather that? We are going to gather that through the usage of online and maybe printed sources by buying the books online, correct? Getting to know a range of available online sources, because we can compare one book with the other and being able to evaluate these sources comparatively. So, if I am reading History of Indian Literature by 𝐈𝐀𝐒 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐥𝐬 and I am reading the same Indian English literature book, History of Indian English Literature by Iyengar, then what am I doing? I am going to maybe judge the both two books and then evaluate which one I am going to go forward with, correct? So, comparison can be drawn. Using online and printed sources to identify and locate material archives, because there are multiple websites where you can see the books even which are banned, they are there. Even the books which are not easily available, certain websites have the archives where you can find those books to read online. So of course for the literary tools and techniques in literary research, you need these very things there. Not participating, of course, networks as other may copy the work, that is wrong. You can, of course, you can gather the data. And peer management technique, that is not told as a particular technique or a tool which we require for the literary research. The online resources and the online material, acquiring those online material things, that is what is required, of course, right? Then, which among the following are written by Mikhail Bakhtin? Answer to this question is option B. That is B and D. B and D are the ones which are written by Mikhail Bakhtin. White mythology, the ideology of the aesthetics, and the morphology of the folk tale, these three are not written by Bakhtin, but then who wrote these three books? We will be talking about them in the answers explanation here. First of all, white mythologies, it has a subtitle. Remember, I told you even in the previous video that whatsoever is the one which has this very semicolon here, the colon, sorry, here, is the one. So this is what? This is the subtitle of the book. So white mythologies, writing history and the West, this is the complete title of the book, and the book is written by whom? Robert C. Young. So we are done with white mythology, right? Then Freudianism, a Marxist critique. This is also what? A subtitle written by Valentin Voloshinov and Bakhtin. So this is a collaborative work. Correct. Third one, the ideology of the aesthetic or aesthetics, is written by Terry Eagleton, a very prominent theorist. Next book, Rebella and His World, is a scholarly work by Bakhtin, which we talked about already, that Freudianism and Rebella and His World is written by Bakhtin. The last one, the morphology of the folk tale, is written by Vladimir Prop. Vladimir Prop, right? Next is correctly matched pairs you are supposed to choose. So this is something related to what? Literary theory, correct? The answer to this question is option B. That is, only A and D are matched correctly. A and D. Must have heard the name of this very book time and again in multiple questions which are asked in the UGC NET examination. Correct? Sometimes they give the term, sometimes they give the book. Right? The Anxiety of Influence is written by Bloom. Of course, correct. John Keble wrote On the Healing Power of Poetry. Correct? Then who wrote these three books? Writing Indifference is written by whom? It is written by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida. So first of all, this very book, The Writing Indifference, prominent book when we talk about what? When we talk about deconstruction. Derrida comes into play, correct? Then Modern Man in Search of a Soul is written by Carl Jung, right? So Jung wrote this very book, and of course this is related to, if we are talking about Carl Jung, he is related to what? Psychoanalysis. Then of course this book is a collection of psychological essays. Next is Jacques Lacan, A Feminist Introduction. Here they just gave this very book, right? So written by Elizabeth Gross. Correct? So these are the prominent books which we should be knowing the names of, and of course these are the correct options, that Harold Bloom, The Anxiety of Influence, and John Keble on the Healing Power of Poetry. Next is G.S. Deleuze and Felix Guattari, Anti-Oedipus Complex, the Anti-Oedipus Capitalism and Schizophrenia. Because Oedipus ke saath we already think of complex, so I read it like that. So the book named Anti-Oedipus Capitalism and Schizophrenia, this is a book by G.S. Deleuze and Felix Guattari. What are the two main, schools of thoughts that the theoretical paradigms that this book deals with, the two theoretical paradigms? So of course it is related to what? Literary theory again. The answer to this very question is option A. That is, it is related to Marxism. It has certain thoughts and certain, theories which are related to Marxism, because capitalism is being talked about here. And C, psychoanalysis, because of the fact that this is really evident by the name itself, because through capitalism, of course, one thing comes into mind, that is Marxism. And schizophrenia is some kind of a mental disease, mental disorder, So what can we talk about here is, it is related to psychology, so it is psychoanalysis. So these are the two paradigms that it deals with. 1972, it was published by French authors Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari. The former a philosopher, so he was a philosopher, and the latter, that is Felix Guattari, was a psychoanalyst. Correct? So two prominent theories, Marxism and psychoanalysis, have been talked about. Which book? Anti-Oedipus Capitalism and Schizophrenia. Next is written by Dipesh Chakrabarty. Which of the books are written by Dipesh Chakrabarty? The answer to this very question is option C, that is A and D only. Provincializing Europe, which has a subtitle Post-Colonial Thought and Historical Difference, and option D, that is The Climate of History in a Planetary Age, where Chakrabarty talks about the global and the planetary differentiation, how the climate is being, the one influencing them. So global and planetary changes are being talked about in here. So what are these three books, which are the rest of the options? Who wrote these three books? The Subaltern Studies Readers, that is 1986 to 1995, written by Ranajit Guha, a very prominent writer when it comes to what? When it comes to the Dalit literature field. Correct? Talks about the history of marginalized communities in India, out of which one is the Dalits. Right? The Dalit marginalization. Then Identity and Violence, which has the subtitle The Illusion of Destiny, is written by Amartya Sen. Correct? Next is the third one, In Other Worlds, with the subtitle SF and the Human Imagination. Now what does SF signify here? It signifies science fiction, or what do you really call as sci-fi. So it is written by Margaret Atwood, the woman who wrote Testaments, right? The woman who wrote The Handmaid's Tale. Account of her relationship with the literary form we have come to know as science fiction. So her science fiction and the imagination, which is written by whom? Written by Margaret Atwood. Next is two books which have their roots in the Foucauldian thoughts on sexuality. The Foucauldian thoughts on sexuality. Answer to this very question is option D. That is B and D only. Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, written by Judith Butler. And D, that is, Epistemology of the Closet, 𝐸𝐬𝐾𝐳𝐸𝐬𝐾𝐳𝐸𝐬𝐾𝐳𝐸𝐬𝐾. These two books are written by, when it comes to, if you read feminism, right? If you read feminism, you will know that even in Gender Trouble, how Butler talks about the gender performativity and epistemology of the closet, right? These two are the prominent. This is basically much and more related to the queer studies, correct? Now, these three books, the other ones which are left, Meta History, The Role of the Reader and Sexual Politics, who wrote these very books? Meta History with the subtitle The Historical Imagination in the 19th Century Europe. It is a work of historiography by Hayden White. It is also a very prominent book, and Hayden White is a name when we talk about the literary theory as well. So what is historiography? History, the elements of history. And what is meta history per se? Meta history is the history about history, writing history about history, correct? First published in 1973, a very prominent date which could be noted down here. Second one, Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity. Again, a subtitle here, 1990 book by Judith Butler, where she talks about the role of gender performativity, that how through our ages we perform our gender and we do not really are born with a particular gender, but societal norms are the ones which create this very thing which we throughout our lives have to perform. The role of the reader, which are explorations, subtitle, Explorations in the Semiotics of Texts, is a 1970 book by Umberto Eco, correct? Next is, this one is related to the reader response theory. Epistemology of the Closet is a book, 1990 book. So this one and this one, Gender Trouble, both written in the same year by 𝐸𝐬𝐾𝐳𝐸𝐬𝐾𝐳𝐸 is a book who is considered founders of the queer studies. So I told you that this book is related to the queer studies per se. So it of course is talking about the Foucauldian thought on sexuality, right? Next is Sexual Politics, is a book by American writer and activist Kate Millett. So that was her PhD dissertation, which later on got published as a book known as Sexual Politics, correct? Next is, which of the following are written by George Peele? Written by George Peele. The answer to this question is option B, that is A, C and E are the ones which have been written by George Peele. A Moon for the Misbegotten and The Scottish History of James Fox are written by. So first of all, Moon for Misbegotten is written by Eugene O'Neill and it is a play, right? Play in 4 acts by Eugene O'Neill, who wrote The Hairy Ape, a very prominent text, correct? Published in 1947. When we got independence, right? So a very important factor to note down here. Next is Scottish History of James IV is a work by Robert Greene. So who wrote this very thing? History of James IV, Robert Greene, published in 1598, correct? Then we have following are true in the context of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The answer to this very question is what? Option C, that is B, C and E only. He was a Caribbean novelist, right? And of course that is wrong, because he was not a Caribbean novelist but a Colombian writer, correct? So this point is wrong, of course. B, C and E are correct. Next is, he was affectionately known as Gabo or Gepito throughout Latin America. Yes, of course, he was known by this very nickname. Third is, he received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1982. Correct. Fourth one, Love in the Time of Cholera, is a memoir written by Marquez. No, it's not a memoir, but it is a novel which has been written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. His novel 100 Years of Solitude was published in the year 1967. So, in these kind of questions, you are supposed to make an educated guess, and that guess should also be the one which should be through the elimination of certain pointers. Correct? So, Colombian novelist, written, it's a novel written by and not a memoir. Correct? Novels written by John Steinbeck. The answer to this question is option B. That is B, C and E are the one which are written by John Steinbeck. The one, The Naked and the Dead and To Kill a Mockingbird, these two are not written by John Steinbeck. Then who wrote these very two works? Naked and the Dead, novel written by Norman Mailer. First of all, this in itself is really important. Correct? And To Kill a Mockingbird, written by an American author, Harper Lee, a very prominent work. Even the students who are not from the literature background must have read this very book. If you come across any of the people who read, who like reading books. Next is, which one of the following are the leading characters in the novels written by Mulk Raj Anand? A question related to what? Related to Indian literature. Correct? So you have to identify the three writers which are from the from the novels of Mulk Raj Anand. The answer to this question is option D. That is A, Munno, B and D. These three, Munno is a character in a novel named Kulli. Correct? Bakha from Untouchable, Gangu from Two Leaves in a Bud. These three are the writers which are from Mulk Raj Anand's novels. Daupadi and Sampath, these are not the ones who are from his novel. So, Kulli, first of all, Mulk Raj Anand wrote this very novel, which was first published in 1936. So, it was a novel which was published in the pre-independence era. Correct? Munno, as the main character, who is a young man, leaves his village at the age of 14 to go to the city and earn. So, Munno leaves his village and then go to the city to do what? To run certain small errands, to earn money. So, it's his journey that we talk about here in the novel named Kulli. Talk about Untouchable, 1935, again a pre-independence novel which has been written, and this one is also pre-independence novel. A day in the life of a young Indian sweeper named Bakha. So, how Bakha's story as a sweeper, an untouchable, a Harijan, has been talked about here in this very time when it was really prominent as a theme. Correct? That how people used to treat the people who were of low caste, the untouchables, which they used to give the title. So, hence the title as well. Then Two Leaves and a Bud, exploited Gangu, whose wife dies of a disease, and he was also killed while trying to protect his daughter by getting raped, right? So, a British colonial officer was trying to rape his daughter and he died in between that very thing, and of course his wife also passed away before this all event happened. Correct? So, Gangu is the person who was trying to protect his daughter and whose wife passed away as well. So, these are the three novels which have been written in the pre-independence times by Mulk Raj Anand with very three prominent writers, and these three novels, the summaries of these three novels should be known to you all. Correct? Next is, identify the correct pairs. I hope you would not have seen the answer to this question. The answer to this very question is what? Answer is option A. Correct pairs. A, B and C, these are the correct pairs, and D and E are not the correct ones. Ivan McEwan wrote Amsterdam, of course, he wrote that one. Italo Calvino, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller, very prominent work which keeps on coming in the UGC NET examination. Amitav Ghosh, All in All, an important Indian writer. The Circle of Reason is a very important work, and so are others of his. Correct? D.M. Thomas, Everest Hotel, incorrect. Doris Lessing, The Testament. I just in some previous slides have talked about this very work. So, of course, you know that the Testaments have been written by Margaret Atwood in the year 2019. It means that this is a really recent work. Correct? It is sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, a very important factual information to note down. Coming to the Everest Hotel, it is having, first of all, it is having a subtitle, a calendar written by Alan Seeley. Correct. Next, again, identify the correct pairs which are here. The answer to this question is option A again, that is A, B and C. These three works are the ones which are correctly matched. Alan Tate, the verbal icon, no. Harold Bloom, the great tradition, no. Great tradition is related to whom? Great tradition is related to F.R. Lewis, correct, and published in the year 1948, where he talks about some prominent writers, correct, and that how the great tradition and the lower tradition he talks about in that very book. So that is there. The verbal icon subtitle, Studies in the Meaning of Poetry, is a collection of 16 essays by two authors, right, by William K. Wimsatt, and it is published in the year 1954. So if we talk about, this was the book that I got confused with, Kenneth Brooks and R.P. Warren, these are the two who wrote Understanding Fiction and also wrote Understanding Poetry, correct? But if we talk about William K. Wimsatt, he wrote the verbal icon, correct? Next, matching the list 1 with list 2 from the Indian literature. The answer to this question is option C. The option is C. Let's just see. Rabindranath Tagore wrote the book, and these are the books which are related to poetry, correct? So Rabindranath Tagore wrote The Child, correct? Muhammad Iqbal wrote The Secrets of the Self, 1915, even before Tagore. Nissim Ezekiel wrote The Unfinished Man, poems written in 1959. Of course, it is a 1959 work. Imtiaz Darkar, Parda and Other Poems. And Parda in itself is a poem which has been written by her as well, correct, in the year 1988. So, try to match these very things. Then again, match the following question here that we have. The answer to this question is option D. Let's just see. Emily Dickinson, because I could not stop for death, because of the fact that Dickinson was also one of the writers who was feeling suicidal at some point of time in her life. So this is maybe some kind of a confessional poetry which she wrote, which she gave the title Because I Could Not Stop for Death. Keith Walker, we are going, she has another name as well, correct? Judith Wright, Woman to Man, in the year 1949, and Yusuf Komunyakaa wrote Banking Potatoes. Such a funny name, no? Next, match list 1 with list 2, because of course if UGC NET examiners give you the questions, there are certain chronology based questions which will be there, 5 to 7 questions, match the list. So that is why now the questions which are given here are the ones which are coming in the context of match the following only, correct? So answer to this very question is what? Option B, that is A 2, B 4, C 1 and D. D is, let me just match it again, A is to 2, B 4, C 1 and D 3, correct? We'll read the explanation in the next page, but you can and you should note this very thing down. See here. First of all, there were 4 humors or bodily fluids that we have in our body which change our mood, correct, or according to what we eat basically, correct? The 4 qualities of matter, the yellow bile, first of all, the yellow bile is related with what? Heat. Blood with dryness, correct, and phlegm with moisture, and black bile with cold. So of course what a person ate was thought to change the balance of these humors and how he or she reacted. Even specific flavors were thought to influence these very humors which were there, correct? So you should note down what kind of humor is, influenced by what thing and from what color is it signified. So sanguine is black, Choleric is, yellow bile, black bile is melancholic, and phlegm is phlegmatic. Correct? So here this very thing. Next is again match list 1 with list 2. These are certain quotes. Of course, all the works are from Shakespeare. Then the question is related to whom? The Bard of Avon, Shakespeare only. The answer to this question is, these are the options which are there. The answer to this question is option A. That is this. Let's just see what year that we have here, right? So, and of course, we had the answer as A only. So, A4, B3. A4, B3, C2 and D1. That is C2 and D1. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with the sleep. The Tempest. This is the quote from the Tempest, and a whole comprehension was asked in one of the passages in, I think, December 2021. Correct? So this very entire paragraph, the comprehension from the Shakespearean play, The Tempest, has been given for the for solving the comprehension questions, which were 5 in number. Some are born great, others achieve greatness. This is from the 12th night. Love looks not with the eyes but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. This line is from A Midsummer Night's Dream. Ill deeds is doubled with an evil word, the Comedy of Errors. Correct? And when were these particular, plays published? Comedy of Errors, 1594. So I have written them in a chronological sense. So Comedy of Errors, 1594 published, 1600 The Midsummer Night's Dream, 12th Night 1602, and The Tempest in 1611. Correct? You can note these things down while watching the video as well, or by pausing the screens as well as we move forward with other questions. Again, list 1 with list 2. The answer to these very terms and from which very theories they have taken is C. Now let's just match the terms. Who was the writer who proposed these very terms and under which theory these terms fall? Correct? So first of all, aporia is a term which comes in deconstruction. Correct? And deconstruction, if we just talk about the term in general, this aporia term was given by Jacques Derrida. Correct? Then we have scapes. Scapes is related to globalization as a concept, and it was given by whom? An Indian theorist, Arjun Appadurai. Correct? Then we have interpellation, given in the Marxist theory, given by Louis Althusser. In the upcoming videos, we will be taking these very terms as well, where you will be knowing that yes, this theme, this term was proposed by this very writer. What does it mean really? But here, just because of the fact that we are discussing certain things, we are analyzing the paper, we are going and moving forward with looking at the answers. Correct? Mirror stage, something related to psychoanalysis given by Jacques Lacan again. Correct? Match list 1 with list 2 again. The books and the writers. The answer to this question is option D. A4, correct, B3, C2 and D1. C2 and D1. So the political unconscious, which has a subtitle, Narrative as a Socially Symbolic Act, is written by Frederick Jameson. Pleasure of the Text, important work written by Roland Barthes. The Straight Mind and other essays which are written by Monique Witting, and Literary Darwinism related to Charles Darwin's idea, evolution, human nature and literature, how that idea of evolution, how that idea of survival of the best. That is, this book is written by Joseph Carroll. Next is list 1 and list 2 again, books written by the writers. The answer to this question is option A. That is, The Famished Road is written by Ben Okri. correct, which deals with the theory, which deals with the theme of change. The Bride Prize is written by Bushi 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿, correct. Third is C is 4, Half of a Yellow Sun is written by Shimananda Ngozi Adichie, right, and The Lying Days are written by Nadine Gordimer, correct. D is 2 and C is 4, correct. Next is again list 1 with list 2. So you see how they test your knowledge entirely and why you need to be doing the revision at times as well, using the PYQs and seeing the pattern as well, correct. These are the options. The answer to this question is option C, that is A to D4, A to B4, C1 and D3, C1 and D3. Toru Dutt, the novel that she wrote, Bianca or the Young Spanish Maiden. This is one option which is correct, which you all can guess when we talk about the writers which were before the independence era. Right? Then we have the second one, Ratan Bai, A Sketch of a Bombay High Caste Hindu Young Wife, written by Shivanti Bai M. Nikambe. Next, The Hindu Wife or the Enchanted Fruit, it is written by Raj Lakshmi Devi. Kamla, A Story of Hindu Life, Krupa Bai Satyanandan, correct. Toru Dutt, a fact that I want to give you, is also known as the Indian Keats. Why was she known as the Indian Keats? Because of the fact that she also died young, as did Keats, correct. So she is known as what? Indian Keats, correct. Could be asked in the question, who knows. List 1 with list 2 again. The answer to this question is option A, that is A3, B1, C4 and D2. Richard Wright wrote the book named American Hunger. Toni Morrison, prominent writer when we talk about the African literature, who is very famous for her novel The Bluest Eye, correct. Toni Morrison wrote A Mercy. Barbara Shays-Ribaud wrote Sally Hemings, and Octavia Butler wrote Kindred. These are certain miscellaneous questions which are there. Now related to the Indian English literature. Match list 1 with list 2 again here. Answer to this very question is option C, that is A2, B4, C1 and D3. 𝐈𝐀𝐒, A History of Indian English Literature, a very concise book if someone wants to prepare for Indian English literature, the Indian writing in English part. David McCutcheon, he wrote Indian Writing in English, critical essays which are related to the Indian writing in English. A.K. Srinivas Iyengar, correct, A.R. Srinivas Iyengar, he wrote what? The Indian contribution to English literature. And V.K. Gopak is the one who wrote English in India, its present and future, correct. Chronological questions related to chronology will be only here now, right? The chronological sequence in which the following texts were published. The answer to this very question is option D. First of all, option D, DBCAE, DBCAE, correct. Let's just see. First of all, John Dryden, I have written the writers and I have written the book names and the years in which they were published, correct. So Dryden wrote 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿, written in the year 1682, correct. Dryden also wrote The Hind and the Panther, and this was also mocked after later on in the, when Pope was there, right. So John Dryden wrote The Hind and the Panther, 1687, so of course it came after the 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿. W.B. Yeats, The Wild Swans at Pool, 1917. and Yeats is only the Tar, written in 1928. Philip Larkin, The Whitsun Weddings, written in 1964. This work in itself is very prominent. These poems, the collection of poems, The Whitsun Weddings, is also really important, and it itself is also a poem, correct? Next is years of birth. You have to choose the writers according to their years of birth. Answer to this question is option B. B, C, B, C, D, A, E. Let's just see now. Edmund Spenser was born around the year 1552-53, of course, so he comes first. Then came Philip Sidney, 1554. Even if you know these writers, they are from different age, you would have been able to guess the answer correctly. John Donne, 71-72. George Herbert, 1593, and Oliver Goldsmith is 5th in 1782. Correct? Chronological order of publication of the works which are given or written here. The answer to this very question is option B. That is B, D that we have here, A, C, and E. Let's see how. Macaulay's essay on Milton was published in the year 1825, correct? So, Lord Macaulay was around the year 1835 when he wrote his minutes. So, you could have noted it down here as well. Browning, Robert Browning's Pauline, published in the year 1833. Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, 1859. Stevenson's A Treasure Island, 1883. Even in the previous video in the part 1, where we saw that this very book has been asked as a question. So you see that even in one shift, they have asked the same question related to the publication year, and here they gave the chronology. So here, if you would have made this very thing in mind clear, that yes, this question is asked in the previous question as well, where I think I have marked it correctly because I maybe chose the elimination method or made an educated guess. So you could have chosen this very option correct as well. So 1883 here. And Treasure Island was published first of all from 1881 to 1882 in the form of a magazine, right? It was serialized in a magazine. In 1883 in a book form it was published. Arnold Bennett's Old Wives' Tale, 1908, correct? Again, chronological years of birth. Answer to this very question is option B. That is B, A, E, D, C. Let's see. Henry Fielding in the year 1707, and of course Jane Austen came after Henry Fielding. So you could have easily guessed this very thing as well because these two people belong to different ages. William Makepeace Thackeray was born in the year 1811, correct? Richard Dorridge Blackmore, 1825, and James M. Barrie, 1860, Peter Pan, correct? Very important work from Barrie, J.M. Barrie. Chronological order of the writer in terms of the period that they belonged to. The answer to this question is option D. That is, Bacon came first because he was in the Elizabethan age, right? Then we have C, Restoration. A, Richard Steele, right? John Dryden in the Metaphysical Time. Then we have D, C, A, B, and on the 5th we have E. See here, Francis Bacon, Elizabethan age, Dryden in the Restoration age, Richard Steele, age of Pope, because at that point of time what were being published and what was Richard Steele famous for? Richard Steele was famous for his pamphlets as well, no? The Tatler, the Spectator, which were going on, the pamphlet writing which were going on, and it was going on in the age of Pope. Charles Lamb in the Romantic age, Matthew Arnold in the Victorian age. Correct? So you can draw connections of multiple writers with multiple books if you know certain works, even a little glimpse of that. Chronological order of the publication of given works again. Answer to this question is option C. That is A, of course. D, Untouchable, we just did Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable. C, Kantapura by Raja Rao. B, A Bend in the Ganges. Ganges is Ganga Mata only, correct? And E, that is Distant Drum. Let's see who wrote which novel and what date were they published in. So, Rajmohan's Wife, written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee or Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay in 1864. So, of course, it came firstly, and it is known as the first novel written in English, correct? So, of course, it will be the first one to be, published. Untouchable, Mulk Raj Anand, 1935. Kantapura, Raja Rao, 1938, of course, after Untouchable. Bend in the Ganges, Manohar Malgaonkar, 1964. It means that it is a contemporary work of the 20th century, right, when people were writing plays. Distant Drum, again by Manohar Malgaonkar in the year 1974. Correct? Then we have chronological order of publication of the given works again. The answer to this very question is option A. That is B, C, D, E, A, fifth. So, Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, a political treatise written in the year 1651. Samuel Pepys' diary, which talked about the major events, the Great Fire of London, which took place in the year 1660 as well. So it talks about that as well. Bunyan's Pilgrim Progress in the year 1678, which was published. Locke's, John Locke's Human Understanding, the guy who gave the concept of what? Tabula rasa, 1689. James Boswell's Life of Johnson. So James Boswell was the biographer of Samuel Johnson, and he wrote Life of Johnson. That was a biography of Dr. Samuel Johnson, 1791. Again, given works, chronology, publication date ke according. The answer to this question is option B. That is B, D, E, A and C. Correct. Who wrote these very books and in what year they were published? First of all, Course in General Linguistics, very important book, written in the year 1916 by Saussure, which talks about linguistics and which talks about semiology. Correct. So Ferdinand de Saussure, the structuralism it talks about. The pleasure of the text, already been asked in one question as well. You see questions are being repeated. Roland Barthes in the year 1973. The Implied Reader, Wolfgang Iser, the year 1974, belonging to the reader response theory. Structuralist Poetics, Structuralism, Linguistics and the Study of Literature, Jonathan Culler, 1975. So it of course is talking about structuralism and linguistics. The Pursuit of Science, 1981, again by Jonathan Culler. Correct? Statement and assertion based questions, assertion reason based questions. From a sociolinguist point of view, mainstream SLA that is second language acquisition studies, remain a social. The social import of learning to interact through language remains unhidden. Reason because of this very thing is a sociolinguistic perspective focuses on the linguistic system, that is on the language only, as well as on the concern with specific items of pragmatic, right, and discourse development, and rejects the tendency of looking at language as a set of norms. So pragmatics is, of course, a study of language only, but with certain rules. Language diversity and ideologies, the answer to this question is, these are the statements. Option C, that is statement 1 is correct, R is not correct. The reason is not correct here because of the fact that it deals with one or the other thing as well. Here in the assertion, of course it's correct. The SLA remain a social import of language to learn and interact with each other. But it remains hidden there, correct? Next is, in extensive reading, the teachers play the main role. The aim of extensive reading is to enrich learners' knowledge. The answer to this question is option D. That is, A is not correct, B is correct. Reason is correct, sorry. Why do we say the teachers play the main role? No, they do not play the main role. The main role, of course, if we are talking about to enrich learners' knowledge, then of course it will be the learner who will be putting more effort for the extensive reading, correct? So that is why this is incorrect. Anagenesis is the final part of the drama just after the climax, in which there is resolution for any conflicts left in the plot. Statement 2, anagenesis is the turning point of the play where audience observes unpredictable change in the play. The answer to this very question is option D. Statement 1 is incorrect, is false, but statement 2 is true, that anagenesis is like a turning point where something unfolds basically, some unpredictable change comes in the play, correct? Then it is true that there is an analogy between the works of an author and the experiences of his life, statement 1. Statement 2 says the works may be seen as an incomplete translation of the life. Answer to this question is option A, that both the statements are true, because of course a writer who is writing, there is an analogy between the works of an author and the experiences of his life, because someone who would have experienced something in his life will write maybe according to that very experience only. The works may be seen as an incomplete translation of the life because of the fact that certain things will be fictionalized, correct? That is why it will be an incomplete translation. Anything and everything will not be put across as the writer has faced in his or her life. Things acquire a rational signification and not only one of simple usage, because an other is associated with my relations to them. Statement 2, in designating a thing, I designate it to the other. The answer to this question is option A, that both these statements are true, and these statements are true in the context of the theory of otherness, which is that if I am designating one thing, I designate it to the other, correct? So these two statements are the ones which are true and none of them is incorrect. We'll be dealing with these statement based questions in a deep sense as well in the upcoming videos. So next question, statement 1, the post-structuralist genre critics suggest that the way to de-essentialize genre is to recast it in terms of discourse through writing or anything like that. Statement 2 says, but while they move toward dialectical exchange and ideology is both successful, useful and necessary. Conceiving of genre primarily in terms of discourse reveals certain limitations that are intrinsic, that have certain kind of intrinsic motivations related to their approach to discourse and to the relationship envisioned between discourse and the subjectivity which it has. So the answer to this question is option B, that statement 1 and 2 both are false when we talk about the post-structuralist genre as a whole, because of the fact that the way they de-essentialize genre is to recast. No, it is not to recast it in terms of discourse, in terms of any kind of writing as well, correct? So these were certain questions that we were supposed to deal, and the part 1 and the part 2 videos were related to shift 2 of English literature. We will be bringing forth some new videos and concepts which might be important, which are of course important from the examination point of view when it comes to the English literature as paper 2 for UGC NET. Till then, you all keep on smiling, keep on viewing these videos for your revision purpose as well, and show some love. We'll be seeing you again. Have a nice day. Thank you so much.